And right before we get to the guests, we want to give you a few important dates to note along the steps that will be taken as Nigerians get ready to vote. And of course, those are a few of the dates that will be quite important for you and for Nigerians in particular. That's when the collection of PVCs will end. The declaration and some of the information that will come out about, of course, the polling agents that will be used by the political parties. I hope I can get that on the screen behind me. And also around the dates that matter in this election. So Nigerians are collecting their PVCs. There's been conversation around the apathy that has been, of course, seen. And you can see right behind me, we're looking at January 30th, 2023 as when the time that INEC will, of course, be publishing a notice of polls as written out in Nigeria's constitution. We also have, of course, the February 23rd elections. That's the presidential and the National Assembly campaigns. February 25th, you have the end of the campaigns, there we go, for the political parties when it comes to the presidential and National Assembly elections. Then there's voting 2 days later on February the 25th. March 9th will also be the last day for the parties to campaign when it comes to governorship and state houses of assembly. And March 11th, the votes will happen. Two dates of very significant elections for Nigerians, and security is one of the issues at the top of the agenda. Security, or the lack of it, has been a major issue for Nigeria and Nigerians for several years now. The different analysis will show you how the different dimensions, scope, and depth of the country's security challenges are. But while the safety of their lives and property are top issues for many voters, even the issue of security around elections and voting is a concern. Unfortunately, Nigeria is not a stranger to electoral violence, which can, of course, affect voter turnout. Joining me now is Cheta Nwanze. He's the lead partner at SBM Intelligence, Nigeria's leading geopolitical intelligence platform. Looking like a spy from the Bourne movies. Cheta, welcome to Election Central. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I'm deep undercover somewhere.
It's fine. We'll take it like that. So let's look at this in terms of projecting ahead of the elections, but also using past trends to develop what we might think will happen. Depending on who you ask, you get a different take on how bad Nigeria's current security situation is. But when we narrow it down to electoral violence in particular, with the data you've gathered and with the data we've seen coming in from INEC, what does the data tell us about electoral violence?
So I think it's important to scope the landscape first. Nigeria's 6 geopolitical zones all have problems right now, and problems is just putting it mildly. From, if we talk about the pastoral conflict in the north central, to Boko Haram/ISWAP, whichever way you want to call it, northeast, to the bandit problem in the northwest, to the IPOP secessionist issue in the southeast, to the militancy/vandalism in the south, and to gangs in the southwest. It's democratized. And one thing that has been a trend over previous electoral cycles is that whenever there's existing violence or pre-existing violence, we have the problem of politicians hitting up the temperature and making things worse. This cycle so far has not been different. And in the year 2002, we tracked 57 incidents that were directly related to campaign or politicking, in which 27 people were unfortunately killed. That's something that has been a problem. That's something that's a cause of worry. And unfortunately, in terms of the work that we do, trying to separate politically related violence from your garden variety violence, if such a thing exists, is one of the difficult things that we try to do. So yes, there is violence. A lot of the violence has been around, for example, registration of votes, and then of course attacks on INEC offices. Yes. We've also seen politicians kidnapped, political rallies attacked in recent times. And I think it's important to point out that while there's a huge interest in this election, insecurity in reports that we have done, including one that we published on January 9th about voter turnout, insecurity has been on the mind of potential voters. Mm-hmm. So if anything will depress turnout this time around, insecurity is likely to be it.
So let's talk about something you mentioned, and that's the attack on INEC offices. INEC too has some data on that in regards to how many attacks there have been, and there's been a different dimension. They've linked some of them also to the protests that happened in 2020 and other political issues around. But more than 50 INEC offices have been attacked in the past 4 years, with the majority of the attacks happening particularly in the southeast and the south-south regions of Nigeria. Does SBM have a theory on why these regions, why attack INEC offices at all?
Well, we'll speak to the southeast specifically. A lot of the violence against INEC is in pursuit of the indigenous people of Biafra's mantra of no election without a referendum. So attacking basically the vestiges of the states in terms of INEC is a way to try to dissuade people from getting involved in electoral practice. And this, unfortunately, if you plot a chart of the attacks, even in the south, you will find that these are areas where the attacks happen, are areas that have Igbo-speaking populations. So it's largely the secessionist crew. If I can use that word, I think a better word to use is gangs. It's largely the secessionist gangs that are involved in this.
Cheta, go ahead. Hello,
Yeah,
Cheta, can you hear me? Yes, I can. Okay, so you're tying the attacks in these regions, particularly in the south, as you said, to secessionist groups. Is that all?
Yes, it's the large one. It's difficult to. I'm not going to stand up and blame anybody when there isn't any data to support what I'm saying. But it's not impossible, or it's logical that a lot of the attacks have gone up on INEC as that mantra of no election without a referendum has really become a thing. So that is, it's easy to tie a lot of the attacks to secessionists, but other attacks could be also rampant criminality.
Cheta, a very important question I must ask you before we leave the conversation for today. When you look at previous trends for electoral violence and you look at sort of the security situation and how it's different from region to region, what do you think we should expect for the 2023 elections with about 530-something thousand security personnel that are going to be deployed? Do we have a handle on security? Could Nigerians rest at ease knowing that they can go to the polls and they're going to be safe?
I doubt it. Part of the brinkmanship of the political class in Nigeria is to try to prevent people in areas that they perceive are dominated by their opponents from voting. One of the things that we saw, for example, in the 2019 elections was that a lot of the violence that happened on election day was in areas that were perceived to be PDP strongholds. So what this means is that even that we have things like beavers now, new technologies to try to minimize that risk. What we'll probably see is that quite a bit of the violence will be the kind of violence that will be targeted at preventing people from getting accredited in the first place. That's the key risk to the 2023 elections from my point of view. I'd like to apologize for my dropping off. The nature of my job means that I tend to travel to places where the network may not be good, but I'll promise that I'll come into the studio when I'm back in Lagos.
And we'll definitely hold you to that promise. We have 30 days to go, and there's still a lot more conversation to be had on this. But Cheta, because of time, we do have to let you go. But it's good to know that we're all keeping an eye on this. And unfortunately, your projection is one that may not give people comfort, but it does call for some movements and some actions to be taken, even with 30 days to go. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.